Hey guys, welcome back to my channel for a true crime Q&A. Although this is a mixture, it's like true crime, history, generally a little bit nerdy. I filmed one of these videos a couple months ago and I said in that video that I was going to do another one soon because I didn't answer all the questions that I wanted to answer, and here we are, I'm doing it. This time around I asked for questions on Instagram, so I got them all here, and I suppose I'm just going to dive in. I'm going to try and answer questions I haven't answered before because it does get quite repetitive. I find people tend to ask the same questions over and over again, but I don't want to be answering the same questions over and over again. So let's see what I've got here. Let's start with a little bit of history. Let's start with who is my favourite female historical figure. Now, when I first read this, the first female historical figure that pops into my head is Queen Victoria. And I'm sure there's probably loads more interesting ones I could interview, but Queen Victoria is just the one that like sticks out in my head the most, like the first answer that comes to my head. So probably Queen Victoria. She had a really interesting life. She was a really interesting monarch, so I suppose an interesting chat with her could be really fun. Somebody asked what is my favourite urban legend, and that has to be Sweeney Todd. Something which a lot of people actually think is a true story. Sweeney Todd is not a true story. It didn't happen, or at least it didn't happen in the way that the musical depicts it happened. Just an urban legend, Sweeney Todd. My favourite film of all time, by the way, Sweeney Todd, Johnny Depp, Helena Bonham Carter, Tim Burton. Cannot go wrong. Dream team. Are there any cases you started to research and abandoned? If yes, why? This happens all the time. I'll start researching a case and I will come across something from a family member saying that they're not comfortable with the media attention on it, or they want people to stop talking about it. And at that point, I will always stop. I'm not about to cover a case that the family do not want covered. If they don't want more media attention, I'm not going to give it to them. So a lot of the times when I start researching a case and then I reach that point, that is usually the reason why I'll stop researching it. But also sometimes I'll just really struggle to like put together the timeline of the case. I'll struggle to find like good sources with correct information, and if I can't be sure that like what I'm saying is correct, or if I can't get together a full timeline, I'll usually abandon the case because I don't want to be spreading any false information or anything wrong. So that is usually the two main reasons why I will start researching and abandon a case. No cases actually spring to mind. I can't think of a single like case name that springs to mind, but I know I've done it multiple times. What is my favourite / most interesting true crime story? Now, I've answered this question before and my answer has actually changed because a couple of months ago I did my serial killer spotlight video on Charles Manson and the Manson family. And obviously everyone knows of the Manson family. I'd heard them before, I vaguely knew the story, but researching the case I found fascinating, and now it is just my go-to most interesting case. There's so many layers to that story that it's impossible not to be fascinated by it. And the reason I actually decided to cover that case was because I watched a documentary. It was actually a documentary that was on Magellan TV called Charles Manson 40 Years Later, I think. And I watched that documentary and I was immediately hooked. I decided there and then that that was going to be the serial killer spotlight I covered for that month. And I was actually going to save this for later in the video, but I feel like this is a good segue now I've mentioned it. So this video is sponsored by Magellan TV. Magellan TV is a documentary streaming site with hundreds of documentaries on all kinds of different topics. They've got true crime, science, history, nature, a little bit of everything. I really genuinely love Magellan TV. You may have noticed they sponsor a lot of the content I do on this channel, and that is because I really like what they do. I like their message. I love to promote education and learning, and Magellan TV is just the perfect site for that. If you love documentaries, you will love Magellan TV. They have new documentaries added weekly. There's always something new to watch on there, and you can watch on your laptop, TV and mobile. It's compatible with Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Google Play and iOS, and loads of the programmes are available in 4K as well. And of course I've got my two documentary recommendations for you. The first one is Mighty Uke. It's a really cute documentary about the ukulele, and it just talks about all these different cultures and how all these different cultures use ukuleles, and it's just a really cute documentary. I really enjoyed it. And the second one is like super geeky. It's called How Cities Work, and it's actually a 5-part documentary. Each part is like 50 minutes long, and it's just looking at all the different like aspects of cities and how like it all works and how like cities work. It's all in the name. Super geeky but really interesting. There's like one episode on like power lines and I really enjoyed it. So thank you for that question. That really was a great segue into that. But yeah, Charles Manson is definitely, for the moment, my most interesting true crime story. I'm still reading about it, even though I did the video like 2 months ago now. I'm still like really fascinated by it. I've been researching everything I can about the case. I've been watching all the documentaries I can watch. I just really want to know how Charles Manson's mind worked. I want to know how he was able to convince so many people to just do his bidding with such ease. It is so fascinating because it's a million miles away from how I understand the world to be. What do I think is the hardest type of crime to solve? I think the hardest ones to solve are definitely the cases where people just disappear from the street. They just disappear. No witnesses, no clues, nothing. They are just walking from place to place and they just go. A good example of this is Jason Jolkowski, I think is the name. Actually, I'm going to check that because I don't want to say the name wrong. Yeah, I was right. It's Jason Jolkowski. He was like this teenager. I think he was sort of like in his late teens. He was over 6 foot tall, this like really burly guy walking from home to work one day, and he just never made it to work. He just disappeared off the streets. Nobody saw a thing, and he has never been seen since. It's cases like that which are so difficult to solve because there is literally nothing to go on. And there's also a similar case of Mikkel Biggs. She was a 9 or 10-year-old girl, I think, or maybe a little bit younger. She was out in the street playing with her sister. Her sister goes inside, I think, to get a coat. And by the time her sister comes out again, Mikkel has just disappeared. Those cases terrify me. They really, really scare me because that could happen to anyone. Anyone could be walking from place to place thinking they're completely safe in their own neighbourhood, their own town, and they could just disappear. It's really, really scary, but definitely the hardest kind of case to solve. What is the best way to request a case for this channel? I thought I would answer this here because I have a lot of people like ask this in the comments on my videos. If I'm being entirely honest, I am trying to stop reading my YouTube comments as much because it's not the most positive place. I always try to reply to comments the first hour or two after a video is uploaded, but I'm really trying to stop just like scrolling through my comments in my spare time because I get a lot of like horrible comments from horrible people, and when a video first goes live it's mostly like you guys are really nice and really supportive, but then outside of that time it's mostly just arseholes commenting, trolls, so I'm really trying to cut back on my just scrolling through comments time. Just being entirely honest with you, it's not the best for my mental health. It wouldn't be the best for anybody's mental health to be constantly reading like just not even hatred, just negativity towards yourself. But I always try to read and reply to as many of my Instagram messages as I can, so that's a really good place to send requests. My emails, self-confessed, terrible at replying to emails, but if you send me an email with a request, I probably see the email. I just can't promise I'll reply to it. Or even just tweet me. All of my social media is always linked down below, so if you want to go follow me on any of those to send me case requests, then that is usually the best place to do it. I would probably recommend Instagram. Instagram, I read everything, try to reply to as much as I can. I can't reply to everything, but if I can reply, I will. So, Instagram, I think, is the moral of that. Is there any case that has truly scared you, not wanting to turn the lights off at night scared? Okay, 2 cases spring to mind for this. The first one is the Max Headroom incident, which is the most random thing ever because it's not really true crime, it's a mystery, but that weirded me out big time, and I said that in the video and people were like, it's not scary, it's just funny, but it really creeped me out. A Max Headroom incident was basically a broadcast intrusion, so people are just watching TV one night, suddenly this weird guy in a mask appears on their TV. Is just like this minute-long recording of a guy in a mask being really weird and really creepy. I think it's because masks in general freak me out, like I don't like masks. So maybe that's why, but that really, really freaked me the fuck out. I hated that. And also the Golden State Killer. I didn't think that one would have the effect on me that it did, but I read I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara, and I think that book is just so vivid, it's so graphic, and it really paints a picture, and it ain't a good picture. Don't read that one in the dark on your own. Please don't. But yeah, that one really freaked me out. Like, I made sure that all of our windows and doors were definitely locked after I read that book. The Golden State Killer is creepy as anything. And I am going to cover a video on him at one point, but honestly, that's part of the reason I haven't done a video on him, because I know it's going to stop me sleeping for quite a few days. Your reason behind being an atheist. I found this question really funny because Surely anybody's reason behind being an atheist is just the fact that they don't believe in God. Like, I don't really have a reason behind it. I just don't believe in this all-powerful God. I don't believe that God created our universe as we know it. I don't believe any of that. So, is that a reason? I just don't believe it. I find it really funny because people always get really offended in the comments when I mention that I'm an atheist. And it's really strange because previously I've never thought it was something that's like controversial. Like, I never thought being an atheist is controversial. I suppose being in the UK is technically a Christian country, but most people aren't really religious in the UK. Like, I have like a couple of friends who are like religious, but the majority of my friendship group are atheist. I think because most of my viewers are American, and America is, in general, obviously not every single person, but in general it's a lot more religious than the UK is, and I think it just shocks a lot of my American viewers whenever I mention the fact I'm atheist. So yeah, it's not controversial. I just don't believe in a God, really. You can believe in a God, doesn't bother me. I just don't. I'm like very much a realist. I believe in science, I believe in evolution. I said evolution really weird then. Yeah, I'm an atheist. No reason, just am. How many hours do I spend filming? Per week, probably about 5 or 6 hours filming. It used to be double that, but I actually got an auto cue recently. Wait, let me show you my auto cue because it is my baby. This is my auto cue. It's just literally like a plastic box with a piece of glass on front. What happens is I have this app on my phone, and so I like put the words up on the app, put my phone in here, and it just like reflects back to me, and it has revolutionized how I film. It is honestly incredible. It used to take me, if I uploaded a 45-minute to an hour-long video, I would literally be filming for about 4 hours. But now if I'm uploading a 45-minute video, I've been filming for 1 hour. So this has really revolutionised the game for me. A lot of people have been saying that I seem a lot more professional, a lot more comfortable since I've got this, and that probably is the case because I'm not having to like read and then memorise and say it, and then read and memorise and say it. It's just a lot quicker. It's fantastic. This is the Parrot Telecaster Pro or 2. I got it on Amazon. If I can find it still, I'll link it down below. I actually had to have it shipped from the USA because I don't have it in the UK. It was about £120. If you're a fellow YouTuber, especially if you do like story videos like I do, like tell stories, I really recommend this. It has revolutionised the game. Do I think serial killers are born, or are they a product of their environment, or both? I think it is a little bit of both. I think a serial killer's got to be born with that predisposition to violence, the sort of lack of empathy, a lack of emotion and feeling. But I think if somebody is born like that but they're raised in a healthy environment, then most of the time they're not going to end up being a serial killer. But I think if somebody is born like that and they're raised in a very negative environment, there's a lot of abuse, emotional and physical, they're sort of like neglected a little bit, that is when I think a serial killer is really, really sort of born in a way. So I definitely do think it is both. Of course, you will get some serial killers who are just raised lovely, like Jeffrey Dahmer didn't have that bad an upbringing. His parents got divorced, he had a hernia, but all in all his childhood was pretty decent, but he still ended up being a serial killer. Like, he was obviously someone who was just so predisposed to that kind of action that he went and did it anyway. But most serial killers you'll find had a very violent and tough upbringing, and a lot of them have head injuries. I feel like that's a bit of like a running thing on my channel. I'm always talking about like serial killers with head injuries, but I find that really, really fascinating because a lot of the time it's a frontal lobe injury and it affects their ability to sort of like have impulse control, and that will often lead to them just being violent and acting out and killing people. Thoughts on Amanda Knox? I don't really have many thoughts on Amanda Knox. If I'm being entirely honest, I don't know that case all too well. Maybe I should look into it for a video. Let me know if you want a video on Amanda Knox. Some people get really annoyed when I cover like the really big cases, but other people like request them quite often, so I never really know what way to go with them. If I'm going to answer that right now whilst admitting that I do not have that deep an understanding of the case, I would say that I probably think Amanda Knox is innocent, but maybe I do need to look into it more. We'll have a look, we'll see where it goes. Would I ever do an update video where I do short updates on a few past cases? I've actually been thinking about doing this a lot at the moment. There's a couple of Jane Doe cases I've covered in the past that have now been solved. I will probably look into that. Maybe in the new year I might do a sort of maybe 45-minute long video updating you on all the cases, new information and stuff like that. Yes, I think is the answer to that. Yes, I will. What is my favourite historical time period to learn about and why? The Tudors. I mentioned that in my video on Guy Fawkes, but the Tudors I find really fascinating. When I was younger I had the Horrible Histories books, And I read every single Horrible Histories book, and I'm not joking, every single one, probably upwards of 5 times. But my Tudors book was absolutely decimated. I read everything I could on the Tudors. Also, my book on Victorian England, I read loads, and the Blitz, like World War II, but specifically the British Blitz. So I'd probably say that I've got the same answers from when I was 9 and 10 years old, and obsessively reading my Horrible Histories books is probably still the Tudors, Victorian England, and the British Blitz. I just find them really, really fascinating. Also, I think I had another question about will I ever cover the World War II on my channel. I will probably cover aspects of World War II, but I'm probably not going to cover it as a whole because there's so much behind World War II that I wouldn't be able to do a whole video like beginning to very end and talk about all of the significant bits in between. So I'll probably cover like aspects of it, but I won't talk about it as a whole because that'll be a very long video and I probably still wouldn't be able to do it properly. Ooh, what would I change about the UK history curriculum? I like that question. So I did history GCSE. I didn't do it for A-levels for one reason, in that we basically, during the GCSE period, we covered World War One, World War Two, and all of the politics behind it. And when it came to me looking at doing history A-level, it was the same stuff. It was just even more politics. I kind of felt like history A-level was more of a politics A-level than it was a history A-level, which is the reason I didn't do it. Kind of regret it now, I kind of wish I did, but also at the time I just remember thinking like, it's just the boring aspect of history. I'm personally someone who's much more interested in like monarchs and the monarchy and all of that aspect of history. World War One and World War Two I do find interesting, just the politics behind it isn't. It is, but it's not fun to learn about really, is it? But if I personally became like Prime Minister or like the head of education or whatever the title is, and I could change the UK history curriculum, I would teach a lot more about the negative aspects of British history, because Britain hasn't exactly been an upstanding citizen throughout history. Britain has done a lot of terrible things, and that is all very much washed over in UK history lessons. Like, you don't really learn about it. I remember briefly touching on like colonialism and all of that at points, but it's not really spoken about properly, and I think it is important to know the negative parts of your own like country's history. It's important to know that stuff. It's how you learn and grow as a society, so I would definitely learn about that. I would learn about sort of like socially significant things like Stonewall and the Black Rights movement and like the free love movement from like the 60s, stuff like that. I think that's not only important to learn about, but it's also really interesting to learn about. I think it will get a lot more people interested in history, like a lot more about like maybe McCarthyism in America, like stuff like that. As well, of course, as still learning about all the monarchs and about the world wars, because that's still important to know about. But do you really need to know every single political thing behind the war? Probably not. Maybe you do, but it's just boring. Why do I think true crime has become so popular over the past few years? Interesting question. I think with the rise of social media, I feel like I've answered this question before and I've given a different answer every time, but my current answer is with the rise of social media, I think people are just more aware of what's happening in the world around them. People are more aware when a big crime happens, and I think when people are more aware, it makes them more nervous. And I think there's a particular reason why females in general are more interested in true crime, and it's because they're often the victims. Not always, but most of the time females are the victims of crime, especially like kidnappings, murders, stuff like that. And so I think the reason why true crime has gained in popularity over the past few years is with the rise of people becoming more aware, people want to know how to protect themselves, and it's just like a natural instinct. I think it's just natural that if you're aware of something, you want to be able to protect yourself from that thing. So you want to learn everything you can about it, so that you can protect yourself if that was to ever happen to you. And I think that is one of the main reasons why true crime is so big at the moment, just because of awareness. What are my favourite true crime podcasts? I actually did a whole video on this, I think about 6 months ago now, which I'll link up here and down below if you want to go watch it. I talk about like loads of podcasts and that. But my favourite at the moment, the one that I'm going to like every day when I'm at stables and mucking out my horse, is True Crime All the Time. I really enjoy true crime all the time, and that is apparently my go-to every day at the moment, so that's my recommendation for you. What's one case I think will be solved in the next 10 years and one that I think won't ever be? Madeleine McCann won't ever be solved, if you ask me. I don't think there's any chance of that case ever getting solved. One that I think will get solved in the next 10 years, probably the case of Alyssa Turney, which I covered a month or so ago. Alyssa Turney was a 17-year-old girl who just disappeared one day, and it is very widely thought that her father, Michael Turney, has something to do with it. He at least knows something, and her sister, Sarah, is working really, really hard to ensure that her sister, Alyssa, gets justice. And I really hope that all of her hard work actually turns up something. I think it's only a matter of time before Michael Turney messes up and incriminates himself. Thank you to the builders next door for that. Okay, so we're going to round this off with 2 more questions I picked out. Can I make more vids on Hollywood? I really liked your Natalia Wood video. Yes, I will make more videos on Hollywood. I really enjoyed that video as well, actually. I found that one really fascinating to research. And also there are a lot of sources for me to pull from on that particular case. So yeah, that was a really, really interesting case for me to cover. And I would definitely be interested in covering more along that vein. Also, I just want to say there is a podcast called Hollywood Crime Scene, which is all about Hollywood murders, Hollywood true crime, which I would really, really recommend. It's a very good podcast. It's on Spotify. I don't know where else, but I listen to my podcast on Spotify. So I would recommend that if you are interested in Hollywood crimes. It's very good. And finally, what killer do I think was most affected / motivated by their childhood to murder? I think there's only one answer to this, isn't it? And it's Ed Kemper. I mean, he says that his entire reason to murder was because of his hatred for his mother. He was very motivated by his childhood and by how he was raised to do what he did. And that may or may not be a sneak peek at a Serial Killer Spotlight video that may or may not be coming rather soon. And that is a wrap on this video. If you enjoyed it, then make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I've got an aim to hit 150,000 subscribers by the end of this year. I don't think it's really going to happen, but I'm trying to like manifest it. Although I've been told that having any negativity towards manifestation means that it won't happen. So maybe it needs to be like, yes, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. I'm going to hit 150,000 subscribers. Thank you so much for watching. Like I said, if you've got any requests for cases, then Instagram is the best place for you to go. If you've got any questions, then Instagram is probably the best place. Twitter, I try to reply to as much as I can, but I find tweets get lost quite easily, whereas Instagram, it's all just there. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.